Well, hello, everyone. And as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, mayors around the world are leading important efforts to protect their cities, to build them back stronger, healthier, greener, and of course, with a more equitable than ever. My name is Francine Lacqua. I work for Bloomberg, and with the support of organizations such as the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group and Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, cities are laying out roadmaps for a strong and sustainable recovery. These roadmaps champion investments in policy and programs that will bolster the economy, but also protect our planet, reduce inequities, and of course, call on national governments and central banks for support. With mayors leading the way, there is hope that the pandemic and climate change can be tackled at the same time. In a minute, we'll be hearing from mayors. I'm really looking forward to our panel. We'll be joined by the mayor of Milan, the mayor of Wuhan, and the mayor of Charlotte, USA. Please remember, you can send questions directly to the mayors through the platform. Please send us many questions as you want or as you can, or try and ask many of them. But before we get to the mayors, a conversation first on the power of city networks and the need to join forces to power ahead. To talk about cities and some of the great work done at city level, I'm delighted to be joined by the Global Covenant Mayors co-chairs, Michael Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies, and Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Commission. Thank you both for joining us, and Mike, over to you.
Well, thank you, Francine, and thank you all for joining us. I'm glad to be here today with the Executive Vice President, Frans Timmermans, to talk about leading a strong and sustainable recovery for the COVID-19 crisis. Here at Bloomberg Philanthropies, we have stepped up to help take on the pandemic around the world, and we've put partnerships and collaborations at the center of our work. We brought together more than 200 mayors for regular briefings from public health and management experts at Johns Hopkins and Harvard University, and from people with experience leading through a crisis. And that includes 3 former U.S. presidents who have addressed the group. We've worked closely with New York State and Governor Andrew Cuomo to launch a contact tracing program that is helping to control the spread of the virus. The effort's online curriculum and training program, developed with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, has now enrolled people across the U.S. and around the world, including 30,000 trainees in Europe. And as governments address the economic impacts of the pandemic, we're working with cities to call for investments that support a green recovery and help fight the climate crisis. Executive Vice President Timmermans and I are co-chairs of the Global Covenant of Mayors, and I want to thank him for his extraordinary leadership on this issue and for being a great partner on city climate action. We've seen how important cities are in the fight against climate change, and I look forward to continuing our close working relationship and collaborating to make even more progress. These are tough challenges, but we're in this together. And with collaboration between public and private sector leaders at the local and national levels, we can emerge stronger, healthier, and more sustainable than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. And with that, let's hear now from the Executive Vice President.
Thank you very much, Francine, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Also to thank Mike again for his incredible leadership in bringing cities together across the world, because we face a similar challenge. First of all, we need to get out of this horrible pandemic, led by science, led by leadership also on a local level. We will make sure that we come out of this stronger. Cities will be leading this also because some of the efforts we will be undertaking in the next couple of years will start in cities. We're going to do a renovation wave across the European Union to bring emission-free transport to cities, to make sure that housing and official buildings are refitted so that they become climate neutral. This is things we will be doing in the next couple of years, but we need to do it at a global scale. And you will see in the next couple of years, leading up also to the COP in Glasgow, that cities will play a leading role in getting the member states, the states that will have to do this work on a global scale, to do the right thing. And mayors across the world have been speaking out on this, have been showing such clear leadership, which compels also national leaders to do the right thing. And I think we've seen last week also in the United States, the role of local authorities, of mayors, of people living in cities, taking us into a more sustainable future with clear examples of what can be done and what should be done in the years to come. And I have to say, once again, that thanks to leaders like Mike Bloomberg, bringing together mayors from across the world, we can learn from each other, we can have the best possible experiences pooled together, and we can avoid the mistakes that also will be made in such a transformational process, and we can make sure that we scale up to a level that will make sustainability a success and that will take us into a sustainable future that will make livable cities the core of a society where we leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mike, as a former mayor, as a businessman, and now through all of your philanthropic efforts, how do we build back better?
Well, we have two things to do, Francine. One is to get the virus under control, whether it's with a vaccine or with social distancing and masks, common sense things that we can do. We've got to stop the carnage of people getting sick. The second thing we have to do simultaneously is get our economy back on stream, because without an economy, we're not going to educate our kids and we're not going to give people the wherewithal to feed their families. And those things are just as important as the virus. And we have to go down both tracks at the same time. We also have to think about the long term and start preparing for what happens when the next virus comes along. We can't assume that this is the last crisis that we're going to have to face. And we could do so much better by preparing for it rather than just waiting till it happens and then winging it.
Vice President, are we on track to build better? How difficult actually is it to change some of these big cities we live in?
Well, I think we're in a very difficult situation. We need, as Mike says, to get this pandemic under control first and foremost. But the fact that, for instance, in Europe, we now understand that we will need to invest massively to get our economy going again, and that we would make a huge mistake if we put this investment in the old economy. We need to put it in the new economy. We need to put it in a sustainable economy. And this is what's happening in cities. Cities understand this. So the move towards zero-emission public transport, the move towards zero-emission housing, the move towards a new economy that is based on digitization and sustainability is what's happening in the cities. And so if we can combine short-term recovery on the basis of a long-term plan based on the Green Deal in Europe, then I think we can kill a couple of birds with the same stone. The thing we need to avoid now is to only be talking about the long term and not showing that we can create short-term results. And the other risk we need to avoid is that we put money in the old economy. Then you create incredible amounts of stranded assets, and we can't afford to do that.
But do you need, Vice President, to give them time to transition?
Well, I think they've started this transition, not all of them. But if we can create a level of solidarity, and I'm really talking about Europe, not only about Europe, but about the world, a level of solidarity that those cities that are forerunners are willing to share their experience with cities that have a lot of catching up to do, we can show that we will leave no one behind. And that's the only way we can avoid some cleavages in our society, because, you know, not just in the US, all over the world, there's a lot of healing to do. There's a lot of people who think that they've been left out of this or that they've been handed the short end of the stick. And we need to prove to them that we will leave no one behind and that everybody can be part of this. And cities can be leaders in this. Cities can also help convince more rural areas that they can be part of this.
Mike, what role do you see for cities and mayors in this green recovery?
Well, in the end, cities are where the people are, cities where the action is, and cities where the leaders really make a difference, because they live among the population and they talk to the population and they set the local rules for where you can go and how far away you had to be from one another. I think the first thing is we've just got to stop this craziness of not believing in science. We've got to educate people that it's the scientists rather than the politicians who should be telling us what the risks are. And then the politicians have to implement the policies, but they should be based on the recommendations of the scientific community. So whether it is wearing a mask or social distancing or how you treat people if they've come down with the virus, all of those kinds of things we've got to start paying more attention to. And we haven't done that. And unfortunately, some of the political leaders we've had have walked away from science, used politics to say things that some people believe and then act on. And incidentally, we in the press also, we push too hard. We don't take the patience to really explain. We've got to do a better job of separating those things that people say for political reasons from what real scientists believe to be current at the moment.
Vice President Timmermans, is there a difference between how politicians communicate and how mayors communicate? I don't know if you can explain the difference between a government and mayors and why mayors maybe need to take a more active role going forward.
Well, I think if I look at Europe, many of the leaders with the biggest credibility in Europe are mayors of bigger cities. And I'm sure this is not very different in the United States. And, you know, if we accept the premise that all politics is local, then, of course, those who are active locally have the biggest connection with the citizens. More so than we. Certainly we at the European level, for many citizens, are far, far away from their realities. And so listening to mayors and listening to their concerns, incorporating their voices in what we're doing is just helping us tremendously to get our message across, and also to make sure that we connect with our citizens. The connection with our citizens goes through the mayors very often. And I believe this is something we should cherish, and we should give mayors a voice collectively also. That's what we're trying to do. That's what Mike's been doing for so many years, so successfully. And I believe this is creating a new dynamic. You know, government is no longer central government telling everyone what's what. Government is something of many, many levels where mayors play an increasingly important role.
Mike, first of all, do mayors actually share more information? So is that how they get smarter? And how difficult is it for a mayor to do his or her job properly if you don't have support at a federal level?
We have organizations, there's 2 or 3 of them, that we've participated in and funded and led, where mayors listen to other mayors as to what happened when the virus struck, what happened when there was an automobile crash, what happened when the economy slowed down, that kind of stuff. So they do share experiences. And in fact, Bloomberg Philanthropies has a training program joint with Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School of Government to train mayors, where they role play and they have speakers come in to say what happened elsewhere. So yes, it's at the city level. The federal governments provide money, but fundamentally, most of these problems are done much further down the food chain, if you will. For example, getting rid of coal-fired power plants in the United States, but it was done without the federal government. In fact, we've closed coal-fired power plants at the same rate under Donald Trump that we did under Barack Obama. Why? Because it's the economics of running a coal-fired power plant and the people living in the neighborhood who don't want to breathe the stuff from the air. Those 2 things, and the customers of the power plants and the employees and their stockholders, they all get together. They're the ones that want to do what's right. And the federal government could be helpful. In fact, it could be a little bit hurtful, but fundamentally, we're getting rid of coal-fired power plants because it's a lot cheaper to use renewables today than it is to use coal, and because that's what the public wants. And so when you come to climate change, the local people are the ones that really are where the problems are and where the solutions are.
Mike, what does a Biden administration actually mean for climate change?
I assume the first thing that the president-elect will do is to rejoin the Paris Accord, which we dropped out of for no rational reason whatsoever. But working with other countries, we can all do a lot more. And I think it also sends a message that America really is in favor of fighting climate change. Joe Biden, I assume, very quickly will put the government back in, and that sends the right message to everybody else around the world. If we stop polluting in America, everybody around the world benefits. If we don't stop polluting around the world, everybody around the world suffers. So we're all in this together, and that's something that I think our past president forgot about.
Vice President, what do you think, a President-elect Biden means for Europe and climate change?
Well, if Joe Biden does what he says he's going to do, the United States will be part of the Paris Agreement again by the end of February. And then we can really start preparing for the meeting we will be having, the global meeting we will be having in November in Glasgow, to see where we need to take the world to get to climate neutrality. And, this is a movement that is gaining momentum. Xi Jinping has announced that China wants to be carbon neutral by 2060, which is a big announcement. Japan has said it wants to be climate neutral by 2050. South Korea has now said the same thing, or is preparing to say it. South Africa has said the same thing. So, we want to lead on this as Europeans, but there's not much point in leadership if nobody follows. But if the United States is moving in that direction again, I think this is going to be a global movement. We're going to get there. We're going to make a success of the Paris Agreement. That's how much of a difference it makes when an administration says we stick to our international agreements. We know we have a climate crisis and we certainly want to do something about it. American leadership here is going to make a hell of a difference.
Mike, given the juncture we're in, are there any important actions that actually mayors and cities can take now to respond to some of these challenges? Can they take them swiftly?
Absolutely. Using less electricity, not polluting, with all of the other things that we've done. All cities the same. They could be as big as a London or a Paris, or as small as a 100-person town. But everybody wants something. Nobody wants to pay for it. And the mayors of all of these cities don't get any credit. People only complain when they don't like something done. And so all these mayors are in it together. They've got to stand up and do what's right. If we don't sacrifice now, we are not going to have a future. And yes, it's very nice, as a friend said, that the Chinese want to stop polluting by 2060. At the rate we're going, the numbers that used to be used for 2050 were then used for 2040. Today, they may not even be good enough for 2030. Storms are getting bigger, carrying more moisture. They're moving slower so they can do more damage. And we have forest fires in Colorado and California that we haven't had ever before, some of them. You can go right around the country and find concrete things that are hurting our planet and destroying our economies and our lives, coming from climate change. We don't have any time to waste here. We've just got to do something now. We can't go and dig coal just to keep jobs going. We've got to switch to renewables. And we've got to find ways to help the coal miners and find employees for the renewable companies. But we just can't sit here and say, well, it's not politically popular. I'm not going to do anything. I'll leave it for somebody else.
Mike, when you look at the vacuum left on climate change over the last 4 years in the US, were cities and companies and business able to fill that vacuum?
Certainly the companies did. What has happened in America, and it's really starting to take place around the world as well, the stockholders of companies, the employees of companies, and the customers of companies are demanding that those companies are more environmentally friendly. ESG is taken off. Every investor worries about this. You have to pay attention to what your employees, customers, and stockholders want. And they want companies that are more responsible and that are working today so that we'll all have a world down the road. When Bloomberg recruits at schools, one of the things when we explain to potential employees that all the profits of Bloomberg is going to the foundation that works on climate change and all of these other things that we all believe in, public health issues, it is a very big deal in convincing them to come to work for us. And there are customers who feel exactly the same way. They feel better about dealing with us because they know that what they're paying, the profits of that go to things that they care about.
Vice President, in the last couple of weeks, you had a major increase in your climate ambition for Europe, a 55% emission reduction, a faster path towards a net zero economy. How do you make sure that you maintain momentum for climate change?
We analyze this very thoroughly. So we're based on science. We're based on very thorough analyses. And this shows that industry can do this. It's going to be hard, very difficult, but we can do this. The three areas where we're really going to struggle is in housing, in transport, and in agriculture. So we need an extra effort in these three areas. But it can be done. That's the big message of our analysis. It can be done. And if we achieve minus 55% We might even achieve more, because technologies are also advancing at quite a high pace. If we achieve that, then we can actually achieve climate neutrality by 2050. It's just 30 years down the road and a lot of work to do, but it can be done.
To you both, and Mike, let's start with you. How do we maintain the confidence and trust of citizens in cities at a time when a lot of people are working from home, a lot of people may be thinking of leaving cities because of COVID?
There's a reason why people live in cities, because working together, you create an excitement and you share ideas and cultures, and the economic opportunities for people are much better. So people aren't going to leave cities. I'm a believer that you can't do the same thing from home that you can do working with your coworkers and visiting your customers. We're going through a phase right now, but most people should assume they're going to have to go back to work, and sooner rather than later. We don't have an economy in the city if people don't go to work. If we don't have an economy in the city, we can't educate our kids. We can't do research at schools. We've got to pull people together. We depend on so many things of working collaboratively and collectively. And then the basic answer to your question is we need leadership. We need somebody that stands up. I'm the mayor of the city, and this is what we're going to do, and pushing the companies, and then the companies, leadership in the companies. We have to be able to get together, share ideas, help one another, and see how we can build for something for our children for the future.
Frans Timmermans?
Well, for me, it's clear that, the answers, the biggest problems are in the cities, and the biggest answers are in the cities. We need two things in our societies to get us moving in the right direction. First, we need to reestablish the beauty of critical thinking. So to avoid falling into the trap of believing in myths and being stuck in our bubbles, because that's paralyzing. It's paralyzing our capability to actually find solutions to difficult problems. And secondly, we need to embrace the concept of diversity as a strength and not see it as a threat. I'm sure this is also a challenge in the US. It's certainly a challenge in Europe. And it's in cities where this is handled in the best possible way, because that's where you see the friction between difference. But you also see that this friction brings creative solutions. Things that are invented to face climate change, to solve the problem, are invented in cities where minds meet, where minds collide, and where in this confrontation they find the best possible solutions. And this is how we show that living together well, developing our capacity to critical thinking, these are the things happening in the cities that will bring humanity forward. And this is happening in cities all across the world, even in cities where there are regimes and countries that are trying to stifle freedoms. The cities will not stand for it. They will show that they can be free even in those circumstances. And that, I believe, is giving us so much hope for our collective futures. I've recently become a grandfather for the first time, and I want for my grandson to live in a free country where diversity is not seen as a threat, and where climate change is seen as an opportunity for our economy and our societies to be sustainable. It can be done. This is the one message we need to bring across. It can be done. And what you see happening in cities across the world proves the point. It's being done. They're not waiting. They're moving. And we should follow that movement. We should support them. We should, bring together the best experiences, share those, and make sure humanity has a bright future. Thank you.
Frans Timmermans, Michael Bloomberg, thank you so much. Well, as this Paris Peace Forum city panel focuses on the green recovery, we're trying to recognize the crucial role that cities must play in rebuilding our economies and, of course, building back better while addressing climate change, providing innovative infrastructure and green jobs. If we were face-to-face, I'd ask you all to give a big round of applause for my panelists. Giuseppe Sala, Mayor of Milan, Italy; Zhu Xinhuang, Mayor of Wuhan, China; and Vi Alexander Lyle, Mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, USA. So before we start the Q&A, I know each of you, and welcome to the panel, welcome to the Paris Peace Forum. I know each of you have some opening remarks. So Mayor Sala, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Francine. Thank you for inviting me, for the opportunity to address this audience. And I take the opportunity to salute Michael Bloomberg and Frans Timmermans, and many thanks to them for their trust in the cities. I believe the title of our session is particularly fitting, as cities are, in fact, leading on a green and just recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have the honor to chair the C40 Mayoral Task Force that work on this. And I'm glad to be able to present some of its findings on behalf of the fellow mayor who participated at the time of such difficulties in their cities. Mayors have joined force because COVID-19 is causing immense suffering and hardship in our cities. The impact of the pandemic has disproportionately fallen on cities, but it is in cities that capacity, innovation, and social dynamics lies to respond to this emergency. So while mayors must continue to focus on preventing the further spreading of the virus and on responding to the immediate needs of our affected communities, we are also called to provide a long-term vision and to prepare for it as well as possible. This global health pandemic has exacerbated a wider social and economic crisis, highlighting our profound interdependence and also the benefit of mutual support and cooperation. Now, C40 mayors share the belief that the pandemic is connected to the climate emergency and that the recovery from COVID-19 is our chance to create the green and just future we want. We believe that the main areas of action to focus on are jobs and inclusive economy, resilience and equity, and health and well-being. Then, we know that cities cannot achieve a green and just recovery alone. So we put forward 6 key asks to national and regional governments and international institutions to support our efforts. Those asks are, first, the only stimulus should be a green stimulus. Second, support needs to go directly to sustainable cities. Third, mass transit must be protected and championed. Fourth, clean energy must be prioritized and advanced. Fifth, we must commit to an equitable and inclusive recovery. And sixth, fundamental, all public subsidies to fossil fuels must end. Because the underlying research to our work proves that only 3 to 5% of stimulus funding is currently directed at sustainable recovery. Unbelievable, right? Instead, investing in green solution would create 50 million jobs. We feel this is very significant and compelling, and that cities action will have a powerful domino effect in pursuing a green and just recovery throughout our continents. For cities, a recovery that is green and just is the only possible recovery, and hold the benefit of sustainable and equitable investment for our citizens. Throughout the crisis, cities from all over the world have showcased their resilient nature, responding quickly and being the first to have a plan on how to recover in an equitable and sustainable way. This is not only our best chance to avert climate breakdown, but it is also the best thing for our economy and for the health of our people.
Mayor, thanks so much, Mayor Sala. Mayor Zhu, over to you with some opening remarks.
各位观众朋友，非常感谢会议主办方的邀请，让我有机会通过视频，和大家进行交流。我在中国的武汉向大家问好。借此机会啊， 仅向对武汉新冠肺炎疫情防控给予关注、支持和帮助的各国人民、各国的国际组织和机构表示衷心的感谢。武汉是中国抗击新冠肺炎斗争的主战场和决战决胜之地。我们在习近平主席的亲自指挥、亲自部署下，经过艰苦卓绝的努力，用了1个多月的时间，初步遏制住疫情蔓延的势头；用2个多月的时间，将新增病例每日新增的病例控制在个位数以内；用3个月左右的时间，取得了武汉抗击新冠肺炎疫情保卫战的决定性成果。面对疫情，我们坚决地关闭了离汉的通道，从1月23日至4月8日，对全市所有的小区、村庄实行封闭式管理，封城76天，有效地切断了疫情传播的途径。面对疫情，我们坚持人命至上、生命至上，不惜一切代价救治患者。全市确诊的患者治愈率达到92.3%，救治80岁以上的老人3600多人，其中治愈100岁以上的患者7人，年龄最大的108岁。面对疫情，我们秉承科学精神，在城市解封重启之后，在5月中旬，用10多天的时间开展全市全员的核酸大检测，集中检测了989万9800人，没有发现一例确诊的病例，实现了我们武汉从无力的解封到心力解封，所以充分证明武汉是安全的，武汉人民是健康的。同时，积极开展疫苗的研制，目前我们的疫苗已投入3期临床试验。面对疫情，我们秉承命运与共的道义担当，毫无保留地与国际社会分享抗疫的经验，用于新冠病原检测的火眼实验室从武汉走向了全球30多个国家，运营的数量超过了87家，相关的检测试剂和设备被188个国家争相引进，成为全球抗疫的中国名片。面对疫情，我们加快推动疫后重整，加大企业的纾困力度，主要的经济指标加快回升，逐月向好。地区生产总值在3季度实现了单季增长6.9%，全市的生产生活秩序全面恢复正常，疫后重整好于预期。各位嘉宾、各位朋友，病毒没有国界，是全人类共同的敌人。只有全世界、全人类携手合作，才是人间正道。借这个机会我提出3点倡议。第一，是共抓疫情防控，加强信息共享，开展药物、疫苗、检测等联合攻关，共同构建人类卫生健康的共同体。第二，共推经济复苏，坚持多边贸易，共同维护 全球产业链、供应链的稳定和发展，促进世界经济包容性增长。第三，共促全球治理，加强城市间的交流、对话与合作，构建命运与共的全球城市伙伴合作关系。各位嘉宾，各位观众朋友，法国大文豪雨果有一句名言：“团结定能胜利。”我坚信，只要全球的城市彼此互信、团结合作，我们就一定能够彻底战胜疫情，胜利一定属于我们。最后，预祝本届论坛取得圆满成功。谢谢大家，谢谢主持人。
Mayor Zhu, thank you so much. Let's go straight to Mayor Lyles now for some opening remarks.
I'm Vi Lyles, and I'm the proud mayor of Charlotte, USA. I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg and Vice President Timmerman and the Paris Peace Forum for the invitation to participate today and talk about how we are tackling some of the most critical challenges between COVID and climate change. First, let me tell you a little bit about our city. Every day, Charlotte welcomes more than 100 new residents, and this city is expected to add almost 400,000 people over the next 20 years. The Charlotte region is home to more than 2.5 million people and is one of the top 5 fastest growing large cities in the United States. With all of this growth comes challenges. Our increasing population density will further strain infrastructure already threatened by higher temperatures and increased precipitation intensity. This growth will also lead to increases in respiratory heat-related illnesses associated with emissions from power plants and vehicles and increasing temperatures. And we're not out of the woods on pandemics. And we know that the people who are most affected are already our most vulnerable residents. Climate change, just like COVID, is an equity issue affecting Black and Brown residents disproportionately. Because climate change has a dramatic effect on the vibrancy and viability of a metropolitan area, one that we're so proud to call home, we made a choice to take action during this pandemic, actions that will be long-term. These actions have brought a focus to us, and we've accelerated during this pandemic. Charlotte has embraced the reality that immediate action and long-term plans are needed to change the way we consume energy. As a signatory to the Global Covenant of Mayors, Charlotte has joined thousands of cities and regions in a commitment to accelerate ambitious, measurable climate and energy initiatives that lead to an inclusive, equitable, low-emission, and climate-resilient future. And with the election of President Biden, we look forward to rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. As a city, we're doing our part, and here are our key areas for looking at climate change, as well as how do we recover our economy after the pandemic. Investing in solar energy, transitioning our fleet to electric buses and cars and trucks, creating workforce development opportunities when they're most needed with a focus on careers and clean energy, building a walkable, bikeable city with accessible public transit, setting goals to become zero carbon in our energy and our buildings by 2030, and a low carbon city by 2050. We know that we cannot wait for someone else to solve these problems for us. And that's why mayors across the United States have stepped up to lead on addressing climate change and building a healthier future for our residents. I look forward to talking more about our work and especially about hearing how our colleagues across the world are tackling these challenges before us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor. So now we start, of course, the panel. And if there's anyone wanting to ask a question, just go through the main front line. Mayor Sala, you were a mayor on the front line, just like the mayor of Wuhan. What's it been like for you personally on dealing with the crisis? How will it make the city better at dealing with the next one?
Yes, thank you for your question. And the first point is how it is like to deal with this crisis on the ground. It is tough, all mayors will tell you that, and it is very complex. The scientists provide a lot of useful information and allows for us, non-scientists, to be able to understand somehow, but reading our current reality remains difficult. And this is why us politicians who need to take decisions on measures and rules for our citizens are sometimes in position to change our minds. Now, I believe there is a great need for flexibility in the way we adapt to an ever-changing context and look for the most suitable solution for our communities. I cannot bring myself to say that this crisis is an opportunity. There is too much suffering and hardship for me to be able to use such a positive term. But I'm very aware of the paradigm shifting experience we are living. And I believe that this is the time for us to strengthen policies and initiatives we are already embarked on that provide the appropriate responses to the new needs of our cities. Those are the innovative measures you refer to and can be enormously beneficial right now and in your city's long-term development. Let me give you an example. For example, the 15-minute city is an interesting concept that many cities are championing, and the credit goes to Paris, for instance. In my city, this concept resonates particularly because we have been focusing on the strengthening of the neighborhood as the fundamental asset for the city to invest in order to improve the quality of life for citizens. The effect of the COVID-19 pandemic make it even more important for residents to be able to conveniently find what they need for a good daily life within close proximity to their homes. So in other words, the municipality, my city, want to guarantee that essential services are within walking or cycling distance for all residents, offering an alternative to mobility by cars and preventing a surge in car travel and related emission and air pollution. Then the cities and business leaders are in conversation to co-design ways to encourage teleworking so that people avoid filling up the mass transportation system at the same time of the day. And this is relevant in view of transforming the timetable of the city to make it more sustainable. One of the innovative measures that has been accelerated and that will be maintained is the rapid creation of up to 100 kilometers of new bike lanes. And this turnaround has been made possible by, let me say, the long-standing work of the city on opening up public spaces, streets, and notably squares for citizens' car-free enjoyment. The Open Squares and Open Street initiative are building blocks of the city's strategy towards a less congested and less polluted city, where public space is socially enjoyable by individuals and groups, as in the Italian piazza. This has helped us to strengthen the reclaiming of squares and streets with a system to grant public space free of charge to bars and restaurants to physically distance their tables and patrons So after having issued over 2,500 permission covering more than 60,000 square meters, we are studying how to make such measure permanent. Most of them convert parking space into social space, and that being welcomed by owners and clients alike. So we are in Milano, we are in our second lockdown, and those measures are relevant for the immediate well-being of citizens as well as for the long-term development of Milan.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Mayor Zhu, I mean, you were the first city to really handle this pandemic. I can't even imagine how hard it was in February and March. What lessons have you learned from the crisis? And how can you apply the lessons that you learned to foster economic growth and climate policy going forward?
好，突如其来的新冠肺炎疫情，把武汉推到了抗疫斗争的最前沿。那么，经过这一场大战大考，我们既有经验，也有教训。那么在这里啊，应主持人的这个邀请，和大家做一些交流。一是实行4早4集中啊，要第一时间果断处置，精准救治。那么，首先呢是要早发现，再早报告，早隔离，早治疗，这样对于出现的疫情呢做到及时的出手啊。再就是要做到4集中。那么，首先要集中患者，再要集中我们的专家，再要集中资源来进行集中的救治，全力以赴救治患者。那么事实证明，我们这种做法呀，有效地提高了治愈率，降低了病亡率。第二是采取最严格、最彻底的管控措施，坚决切断传播途径。刚才我在发言中讲到分层的管控措施，刚才米兰的市长也提到了他们第2次来进行分层，所以这个分层啊是非常有效的措施。我们在分层的这个基础上，我们还采取了5个100%的最严措施，这就是做到确诊病例的100%的收治，疑似病例的100%的核酸检测，发热病人的100%的核酸检测，密切接触者100%的隔离，小区村庄100%的封闭管理。那么我们这一些措施采取以后，全市每日新增的确诊病例很快就从1000例左右迅速下降到100例以内啊。第3呢是建设方舱医院，收治轻症患者。我们利用了会展中心、体育场馆、厂房、仓库这一些设施，建成启用16座方舱医院，开放床位13000多张。那么累计收治轻症的患者是12000多人。全市治愈出院的新冠肺炎患者中，每4个人就有1个是在方舱医院治愈的。而且呢，我们所有的方舱医院，我们做到了医务人员零感染，病人零死亡，治愈的病人零回头。第4呢是要开展集中大排查，从源头阻断社区的传播。在今年的2月17日，我们开始对全市421万户居民 开展为期3天的拉完式的大排查，将确诊患者、疑似患者、密切接触者全部进行集中收治和集中隔离，消除潜在的疫情传播风险。但是这次疫情也暴露出我们武汉市在公共卫生和城市治理中的短板弱项。比如说公共卫生体系的建设还相对滞后，对重大传染病收治能力还不够强，屏障结合的体系还没有完全建立起来。那么这个基层的医疗卫生机构的服务能力还不足，分级诊疗体系也没有完全形成，医疗物资既有储备、产能储备都存在短板。疫情爆发的初期，医用资源严重挤兑，我们应急物资储备也有待加强。另外就是疾病的预防与治疗这个环节的联系还不够紧密，防和治一体化的能力与机制还需要进一步的强化，等等，这都是我们存在的一些问题和不足。那么当前我们正在统筹推进常态化疫情防控和经济社会发展，着力完善疫情防控的设施，加快补起我们城市的功能和公共卫生这方面的一些短板，一是加快建设更为安全的韧性城市，将全周期管理的理念贯穿到我们城市规划、建设和管理的全过程，扎实的做好城市应急处置、公共卫生防护、基层社会治理、矛盾风险化解、城市精细管理等工作，健全多点出发的预警机制，提升我们城市防灾、减灾、救灾的能力。二是要加快建设更具活力的健康城市，推进常态化疫情防控，完善疾病预防控制体系，建设重大公共卫生医学中心，构建屏障结合的重大疫情防控体系。三是加快建设更可持续的绿色城市。武汉市是虽四邻城市气候领导联盟的成员城市，我们正深入实施碳排放达峰行动计划，并与法国政府合作建设中法武汉生态示范城，努力促进城市的可持续发展。谢谢。
Thank you so much, Mayor. Now, I'm getting a lot of questions, of course, on leadership, sustainability in terms of economic growth, inclusive growth as well. So, Mayor Lyles, this is a perfect question for you. The U.S. has had one of the highest at the moment infection rates in the world, really. How have you, as mayor, faced up to that challenge? But also, how have you put in place some tangible actions to ensure that the COVID recovery is equitable?
Thank you for this question. Charlotte, like many U.S. cities, has been challenged with the impact of COVID, particularly illustrating the disparity in our country and our cities of race and economics. So we must deal with disparity and we must deal with recovery, addressing that disparity, both in terms of what we have been doing and what we need to change. So what's most important to me is that we provide support to those most impacted by those devastating effects, and at the same time be focused on our climate goals. And we've done this in very specific ways. First, one way is that we focus on training and employment, especially for working wage jobs. This is where the pandemic has hurt people most, essential workers. We've leveraged our federal funding to strengthen our workforce development and efforts in a clean economy. We did this by launching what we call RENEW, Renewable Energy and Efficient Workforce Training. The focus on this training is not only on specific careers in clean energy economy, but is focused on expanding opportunities for those that have barriers of employment, whether or not they have an education level or the skill set or the need for the digital divide to shrink. Our group of students will not only have the classroom training, but what we'll do, working with the private sector, they will get training that commits the corporations to hire the students and bring them on immediately for jobs. So no application, you go right from training into jobs. They will be paid the entire time, but more importantly, in those jobs, we are giving them a livable wage that puts them on a way that they can support their families and have also an effort that they understand their job is about climate change. We've taken that action that supports addressing the change through initiatives also in my second focus, which is equitable transportation options. We have seized this moment to double down to connect people to jobs to reduce our carbon footprint. Right now, transportation emissions make up 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, so it is our biggest priority. We're doing this in ways big and small. We've launched important initiatives that create a more walkable, bikeable, and transit-friendly city. This includes testing bus-only lanes and taking advantage of the fact that we have less traffic during this pandemic and we can improve our bus system for riders and open it up for others to consider to ride. We're developing guidelines to support more outdoor dining, more ways to be outdoors in our open spaces, because we know that businesses and people have been impacted by the impact of COVID, keeping them indoors. We need to make it safe for them to be outdoors. We have a special program called Street Eats. At the time that we're creating this more walkable, vibrant street, we're working with people to come outside and eat. But we've also done some other things. We've opened up to artists who have made our city more vibrant. The artists that painted a Black Lives Matter on a street in our center city, we've had this become a destination for people to visit and reflect on the issues of restorative justice and justice through a lens of equity in our city. If you've not seen our murals, go online, check it out. It is truly beautiful. But on a larger scale, we've begun the process of transitioning our bus fleet to electric by working with our utility, Duke Energy. By transitioning to an electric fleet, we'll make a huge impact on those emissions and ensure those residents who live along the major bus corridors, who again are often our Black and brown residents, they will have the benefit of a better quality in terms of air and the environment. Finally, the third thing is probably so very important. It's an aspect of our work to laying a groundwork to realize our vision for a transformative mobility network, a walkable, bikeable city with accessible rail and bus transit. This effort has been named Charlotte Moves. Charlotte's Move is to help us reduce our emissions, connect people to jobs, something that's much needed after this COVID pandemic, because we are experiencing recession in our lowest income workers, our essential workers. The connections that we're making will address systemic disinvestment in Black communities and break down intentional barriers that throughout this country and our cities is a result of racism, systemic racism. At my direction, Charlotte will be discussing the boldest mobility endeavor ever attempted in our city. And I hope the next time that you're in USA, come to Charlotte and see the results of this work. It's been difficult, but it is essential that we become a low carbon city. And we're so fortunate to be a part of a global community that is committed in the many ways leading the charge when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. But Charlotte's not going to be deterred by the magnitude of the work that needs to be done. And we will not wait until this pandemic is over to address these challenges because they are intimately linked and vital for becoming a healthy climate and a pandemic resilient city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions from a lot of people watching us, and I have questions from Ottawa. I have questions from Africa, Asia, Europe. So thank you for all of the questions coming in. And there's a common theme. I had at least 5 or 6 questions on this. Is the vaccine to COVID-19? What's the best way to get access to it? Mayor Lyles, maybe let's start with you. What do you see as the prerogative, or what role do mayors play in this? We don't often give mayors enough credit for actually needing to, you're almost on the front line. You're the ones that make real difference to citizens. How do you access this vaccine? What role do you play in negotiating in this?
I will tell you, the first role that I have is to convince people, after having a president who has described it in a way that makes people feel that they can't trust government, my role is to give confidence to people in our city that this is something that is going to be good and necessary, and that they have to trust us that this vaccine will work. In addition to that, we have a vaccine plan working with our healthcare systems that we will be able, and we're very different in terms of all across this country, it's like every mayor, every governor has the opportunity to make a plan and have a different plan. But I think that the plans that we make, one, we have to make sure that it's accessible to those that are most vulnerable to COVID. And then the second thing is that you have to convince the public that they can have confidence in their government, that we're doing the right thing and the vaccine is safe. If we can accomplish those 2 goals, I believe, just like in other pandemics when we've had flu and polio, that we will be able to serve and have a national effort to make sure that people have access to the vaccine and that they're willing to take it.
Mayor Sala, what do you see as the biggest challenge in accessing the vaccine and maybe distributing the vaccine?
For me, it is fundamental to have a clear vision about the availability of the vaccine. I am asking my government to be clear because I want to tell my citizen we have to resist until February or March or April. It is clear that the next winter will be very difficult, but the real question is when and how, so we can organize the system in the city to be prepared and to call the people to have the right space. But up to date, we don't know how many single vaccine we will have and at what time. So that is my ask to my government now.
What about you, Mayor Zhu? What is your biggest challenge right now going forward? Either vaccine or actually redesigning parts of the cities for this post-COVID world?
这个我们对新冠肺炎要最后取得决定性的胜利，我想在全球都要控制好，疫苗确实是非常重要的。那么作为政府呢，应该还推动疫苗的科研推动我们的科研机构，推动我们的具有这方面能力的积极投入疫苗的研究。我们在新冠肺炎发生以后，我们就支持了2家进行研究。那么目前这个疫苗都到了3期临床，我们想到后面一段时间呢，可能3期临床结束了，我们这2支疫苗就将会投入到疫情的防控之中。我们在那个时候，我们也希望把它拿出来，让全世界都来分享谢谢。
Thank you, Mayor. We talk a lot about information being shared amongst mayors, amongst big cities, and a lot of politicians point to mayors and saying, well, if they can do it, we can do it too. Can you give us, Mayor Sala, maybe a bit of an idea through some of the networks, be it C40 or other networks, where you share information and what kind of difference it's made to you and the city of Milan?
Yes, my idea that first of all, we have to work together let me say, to prepare both a political statement, but also a very concrete set of policies and experiences to be put to the service of all levels of government. We prepared a report, and according to this report, the mayoral task force, it is clear that if we move in this way we mentioned before, so if we will address funds into investment in mass transit, working or cycling infrastructure, or clean energy, we can create over 50 million good, sustainable jobs by 2025. We can save lives by reducing air pollution by almost 30%, and we led to over 1.4 million US dollars savings in health costs. So the case for a green and just recovery is clear. It provides the best chance to prevent climate breakdown, and would deliver for far more green jobs and health benefits in longer term. This is the credo of the C40 mayors.
Thank you so much. Mayor Zhu, when you look at COVID-19 and some of the legacy going forward, how does that change the relationship between citizens and their cities? Does it change where people want to live in Wuhan? Does it change what kind of disposition they want to see?
Pardon?
I think we should wait for, I don't know if you heard me or if I know you're waiting for the translation, but Mayor Zhu, I wanted to ask you, if people want to maybe leave big cities, how you think your citizens will change because of COVID?
Just leave.
谢谢你的提问。这次新冠肺炎疫情对武汉造成了前所未有的冲击，尤其是在疫情发生最严重的2月这个时候。那么到3月18号，我们新增病例呢就为0了。但是市民经过这场疫情之后，有很多心理是非常脆弱的。那么我们在这个新冠肺炎控制住以后，我们用了很大的精力来进行疫后综合症的消除，要对很多治愈后的病人和对有病人的家庭进行心理疏导，帮助他们消除这种心理上的阴影，让他们都回入到生活、工作和学习的常态之中。我觉得这方面呢，就是在各个城市可能都会面对。那么武汉市在前期疫情是很严重的，大家都知道。那么在疫情结束之后，这方面对市民心理上的安抚也是很重要的。那么我要告诉各位同事，我们经过这一些努力之后，我们很多的心理医生、精神医生投入到社区工作中。现在武汉呢各方面基本都恢复正常了。这些有心理障碍的市民，通过这些心理辅导以后，也都得到了很大的缓解。所以武汉呢，现在是一个健康的城市，是一个充满活力的城市。我也欢迎朋友们，如果到中国来的话，一定到武汉来看一看，看一看疫后的武汉是一个什么样子。谢谢。
Thank you so much. Mayor Lyles, let me ask you the same question, how you think it will change. And let me also add another question, because we only have 5 minutes left. So, Mayor Lyles, first of all, how do you think it changes the relationship between citizens and mayors? But also, if there's one thing that you would change, if there's something that you could fix right now, or that you want to fix in the next 12 months, what would that be?
Well, what I want to do is make sure that any decision that we make as government is going to have an impact not just for this generation, but the generations to come. And that's why we have to do, as they say, we have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, because you have to be able to focus on the immediate. And I would say the thing that I would change most is the access to care for the people that didn't have health care opportunities that we did not know. It was like we knew we had a crack, but it's become a crevice with health care issues. And I think that's going to be one of the very first things that we have to focus on coming out of this pandemic, is looking at communities that needed access to care, access to healthy food, access to a really good environment. We've got to think about this, where we have made environmental decisions in our zoning rules and where we built housing that we haven't provided for that lens of equity that says that we're not going to pollute water and air where our most vulnerable residents live.
And Mayor, do you think you have the city behind you for that?
I think that it's not always that there's a saying about if the people will lead, the leaders will follow. And I believe that the residents of this community have walked the streets and they've protested around justice and the things that we're doing around equity. So I believe that, and this is a case where the residents will push the leaders to do the right thing.
Thank you. Mayor Zhu, what would you change in the next 12 months? If you only had one thing, one wish to change in the city of Wuhan, what would it be?
Ah, 我们对经历了这场疫情之后啊，我们深深感到，要彻底战胜疫情，还要发展经济，还要改善民生，还要不断的完善我们的公共卫生的这个体系。所以我们现在在用很大的力度来投入，使我们的社区医疗机构能够不断的增多，使我们市里面的这一些3甲以上的医院要不断的增多，同时呢，要把养老设施要不断的增多，就通过民生的进一步的改善，让市民生活的质量进一步提高，这样我们抗击疫情、抗击各种困难的能力就会得到提升，那么整个经济的增长和恢复的能力也会得到巩固啊。所以我们现在都在致力于这方面的改善，而且呢，从目前看，效果还很好。谢谢。
Thank you so much, Mayor. And finally, Mayor Sala, what is your greatest wish for the next 12 months?
Not simple. I mean, now let me tell you some few words about my city. The residents in Milan are 1.4 million, but in 2019, another 1.7 million people entered any single day into the city. They were commuters or tourists. So now we were a city with, I mean, a daily life of 3 million people. And in this period, we are jumping down to 2 million because due to the teleworking and I mean, the crisis of tourism, we have to reshape the city. This is the problem. Because now we are refunding, through the government, we are refunding the owners of bar or restaurant. We are closed in this second lockdown. But what about their future for the next 12 months? So we have to work to point on our qualities, universities, creativity, fashion, design, partnership, between private and public, because I mean, it is not possible, otherwise it is not possible to reconfirm to all these guys that they will find the job when we will open. So that is the real problem for we mayor.
Thank you. A deep, felt thank you to, of course, all of the mayors joining us today. I know you have a lot of work to get ahead in the next 12 months. Congratulations on the work that you've done so far. I'm very delighted to have spoken to Mayor Sala of Milan, Mayor Zhu of Wuhan, and Mayor Miles of Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.